The afternoon sunlight streams through the blinds of Michael's home office, casting long shadows across the mahogany desk where I'm sitting. Papers are scattered everywhere. Bank statements, investment portfolios, insurance documents, all the financial pieces of a 32-year marriage that I'm now trying to put together for a loan. My hands won't stop shaking as I hold this single sheet of paper that's just shattered everything I thought I knew about my life. It's a life insurance policy for $250,000 purchased 8 months ago, just after Michael turned 61. At first, I felt relieved. Thank God, I thought. At least he was thinking about my future, about making sure I'd be okay if something happened to him. Michael always said he wanted to take care of me even after he was gone. But then I read the beneficiary line: Jessica Chun, co-worker and dear friend. Not Clara Martinez, his wife of 32 years. Not the woman who moved across 3 states for his career. Not the woman who gave up her teaching job to support his climb up the corporate ladder. Jessica Chun, his 20-something co-worker with a bright smile and ambitious eyes, who I'd met exactly 3 times at company events. I buried my husband of 32 years last Tuesday. The funeral was beautiful, packed with colleagues, neighbors, and family members who all told me what a wonderful man Michael was, how lucky I was to have had such a devoted husband. His boss gave a touching speech about Michael's dedication to his work family. Jessica was there in the 3rd row, dabbing her eyes with tissues, accepting condolences like she was family. Today I discovered he'd been planning a future without me. The policy is dated 8 months ago. 8 months. I try to remember what was happening in our lives then. We were talking about retirement, about finally taking that trip to Europe we'd been planning for years. I was researching travel guides for Italy while he was apparently researching how to financially abandon me. The worst part isn't even the money, though. God knows I'll need it now that his pension is gone, and I haven't worked in 15 years. The worst part is that phrase, dear friend, like I'm nobody. Like 3 decades of marriage, of building a life together, of being his partner through promotions and setbacks and dreams and disappointments amounts to nothing compared to whatever relationship he had with a woman young enough to be our daughter. I keep staring at his signature at the bottom of the page. The same signature that's on our marriage certificate, on our mortgage, on birthday cards that said, "To my beloved wife." But this signature was meant to erase me completely. My sister Rosa keeps calling, but I can't bring myself to answer. My daughter Emma texted from Denver asking how I'm handling the paperwork. My son Daniel sent flowers with a note saying he's thinking of me. They all think I'm grieving the loss of a good man, a devoted husband. They have no idea I'm grieving the loss of an illusion. I'm sitting in the home office of a man I thought I knew completely, surrounded by evidence that I didn't know him at all. 32 years of marriage, and apparently, I was just the placeholder until something better came along. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. My name is Clara Martinez, and this is the story of how I discovered that sometimes the people we love the most are the ones planning to hurt us the deepest. To understand how devastating this betrayal feels, you need to know what I thought we had, what I believed was real for over 3 decades. Michael and I met in college at Arizona State. I was studying elementary education, passionate about teaching kids to love learning. He was in business, already talking about climbing the corporate ladder and making something of himself. When he proposed during my student teaching semester, I thought I was the luckiest woman alive. He was ambitious, charming, and he made me feel like I was the center of his world. "Clara, you're going to be my secret weapon," he'd say, spinning me around our tiny apartment. "Behind every successful man is an incredible woman, and you're going to be mine." I graduated with my teaching degree, but 6 months into my first job at Riverside Elementary, Michael got his first big promotion. It meant moving to Tucson. I remember crying as I cleaned out my classroom, taking down the alphabet posters, and packing up the books I'd bought with my own money. But Michael held me close and said, "Baby, this is just the beginning. We're building something together. Your sacrifice now means security for our future." So I followed him. Tucson became Denver. Denver became Phoenix. 3 cities, 3 times starting over. Each time I'd find a teaching position, start building relationships with students and parents, create a little corner of the world that felt like mine. And each time Michael's career would call us somewhere else. "You're so adaptable, Clara," he'd say, watching me pack up another life. "That's what I love about you. You make anywhere feel like home." By the time Emma was born, I'd been out of teaching for 2 years. Michael was making enough that we didn't need my income. And honestly, I loved being a mother. Daniel came 2 years later, and I threw myself into being the perfect wife and mom. I organized Michael's business dinners, maintained our beautiful suburban Phoenix home, volunteered at the kids' schools, and made sure Michael never had to worry about anything domestic. Our Sunday mornings were sacred. We'd sit on our back patio with our coffee, watching the Arizona sunrise paint the desert mountains. Michael would spread out travel brochures, and we'd plan our retirement dreams. "Italy first," he'd say, his hand covering mine. "Then France, maybe Greece. We've earned it, Clara. All those years of you holding down the fort while I built our future." "You really think we can afford it all?" I'd sometimes ask. "Clara, sweetheart, you let me worry about the big financial picture. You handle the day-to-day stuff perfectly. I'll make sure we have everything we need for retirement. That's my job, to take care of you." I trusted him completely. Why wouldn't I? He'd never given me reason not to. I handled our household budget, paid the mortgage, managed our checking account. Michael dealt with investments, retirement planning, insurance policies, all the complicated financial stuff that he said was too complex for me to worry about. "You're my anchor, Clara," he'd tell me regularly, usually when he was stressed about work. "I couldn't do any of this without you. You keep me grounded, keep our life stable. You're the foundation everything else is built on." I believed him. I believed I was essential to his success, that our partnership was real, that all my sacrifices were building toward our shared future. I believed that when he said I was his anchor, it meant I was valuable, necessary, irreplaceable. I had no idea that anchors are also the things that get cut loose when someone wants to sail away. The first crack in my perfect marriage appeared on a Tuesday evening in October, about 6 months before Michael's heart attack. I remember the date because it was our wedding anniversary, 31 years, and I'd spent the afternoon making his favorite dinner, herb-crusted salmon with roasted vegetables. Michael had been working later than usual for weeks. The marketing department was preparing for their biggest campaign launch of the year, and he'd been coming home around 9 or 10 most nights, exhausted and distracted. I understood. His job was demanding, and this campaign could mean another promotion. But it was our anniversary. Surely, he'd make an effort to get home on time tonight. By 8:30, dinner was getting cold. I'd already moved the candles from the dining room table to the counter to keep them from burning down completely. I tried his cell phone twice, straight to voicemail, so I called his office line, figuring maybe he was in a meeting and had his phone on silent. "Martinez and Associates Marketing, this is Jessica." I paused, confused. It was almost 9 p.m. Why was she still there? "Oh, hi Jessica. This is Clara, Michael's wife. Is he available?" "Clara, hi." Her voice was bright, almost chirpy, too cheerful for someone who should be exhausted after a 12-hour workday. "Michael's in the bathroom right now, but we're just finishing up the quarterly presentation for the Henderson account. You know how perfectionist he is about these things." There was something in her tone, a familiarity that felt wrong, like she was sharing an inside joke with me about my own husband. "We?" I asked. "It's just the two of you there?"
"Oh, yes. We've been at it all day."
Michael ordered Chinese food around 6. He's such a sweetheart, always thinking about everyone else. He got me those little pork dumplings I love. She laughed, a light musical sound. He pays attention to everything, doesn't he? My stomach tightened. Michael had never mentioned that Jessica had favorite foods. He barely mentioned her at all, except in passing references to the team or my staff. "Well, could you tell him I called? We had dinner plans." "Oh." Jessica's voice dropped, suddenly apologetic. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea. He didn't mention anything. We've just been so focused on getting this presentation perfect. You know how important this client is to him." "Actually, I didn't know. Michael used to tell me about his important clients. Used to bounce ideas off me during our Sunday morning coffee sessions.
When had he stopped doing that?
Of course, I said, forcing my voice to stay pleasant. Just let him know I called. Absolutely. And Clara, happy anniversary. He's lucky to have someone so understanding. She knew it was our anniversary. How did she know it was our anniversary? When Michael finally came home at 10:15, I was loading the dishwasher, the romantic dinner scraped into the garbage disposal. Sorry, babe, he said, kissing my cheek absently. Jessica and I got caught up in this presentation. You know how these young employees are, so eager to impress they lose track of time. She mentioned you bought her favorite dumplings. Michael paused in loosening his tie.
What?
The Chinese food. She said you got her the little pork dumplings she loves. Since when do you know what Jessica's favorite foods are? He laughed, but it sounded forced. Clara, come on. I've worked with her for 2 years. When you spend that much time with someone, you pick up on their preferences. It's just being a considerate boss. I wanted to believe him. I pushed down the uncomfortable feeling in my chest and told myself I was being paranoid. Michael was a thoughtful manager. Of course, he'd learn his employees' preferences. But that night, lying in bed next to my sleeping husband, I couldn't shake Jessica's voice from my head. The way she'd said, "We've been at it all day," with such comfortable intimacy. The way she knew it was our anniversary. The way she'd called him a sweetheart. After that anniversary night, I started paying attention to things I'd been unconsciously ignoring. The changes in Michael weren't sudden. They'd been happening gradually, like water slowly, wearing away stone. I just hadn't wanted to see them. Our Sunday morning coffee ritual was the first casualty. For years, those 2 hours on the patio had been sacred. Just us planning our week, talking about the kids, dreaming about retirement. But Michael started bringing his laptop outside, checking emails between sips of coffee. The Henderson campaign is heating up, he'd say, not looking up from his screen. Jessica sent some revisions overnight. She really gets the vision for this project. Jessica. Her name started appearing in our conversations like an unwelcome house guest who wouldn't leave. Jessica had ideas about the marketing strategy. Jessica stayed late to perfect the presentations. Jessica understood the client's needs in ways that impressed everyone. I tried to redirect our conversations back to us. Remember when we talked about renting that villa in Tuscany? I found some beautiful options online. He'd murmur, still typing. That sounds nice, Clara. We'll look at it later. Later never came. The worst part was how he started responding to my daily life like it was background noise. I'd tell him about my volunteer work at the literacy center, about the elderly woman I was helping learn to read, about how rewarding it felt to see her excitement when she finished her first book. Michael would nod absently, making the right sounds. That's great, honey. And I'm proud of you. But his eyes stayed on his phone. I started testing him. During dinner, I'd tell him about things that never happened just to see if he was listening. I ran into Mrs. Peterson at the grocery store today. She said her son got arrested for selling drugs. That's nice, Clara. Mrs. Peterson's son is a pediatrician in California. Michael didn't even blink. The emotional distance became physical distance, too. Michael started falling asleep on the couch, claiming he didn't want to wake me when he came to bed. He stopped reaching for my hand during movies. When I'd snuggle up to him on the couch, he'd shift slightly away. Not obvious enough to comment on, but clear enough that I felt it. Our conversations became purely functional. Did you pay the electric bill? What time is Emma calling Sunday? Can you pick up my dry cleaning? I felt like his personal assistant, not his wife. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening in February. I'd made his favorite dessert, apple pie, from scratch, something I hadn't done in months. I was excited to surprise him, to maybe recapture some of the warmth we'd lost. Michael, I made apple pie. Your grandmother's recipe, remember? He looked up from his phone with mild annoyance. Clara, I'm trying to review Jessica's presentation notes. This is important. I know it's important, but I just thought not everything needs to be a production, Clara. Some of us have real responsibilities. Real responsibilities. Like my volunteer work wasn't real. Like managing our household wasn't real. Like 31 years of supporting his career wasn't real. I stood there holding a pie I'd spent 3 hours making, feeling foolish and invisible. When did I become someone whose efforts were dismissed as productions? When did caring about our connection become an inconvenience? That night, my sister Rosa called for our weekly check-in. I tried to sound normal, but she knew me too well. Mija, what's wrong? You sound different.
Are fine, Ilid?
Just tired. Clara, when did you start apologizing for existing? Her words hit like a slap. Because that's exactly what I'd been doing. Apologizing for taking up space in my own marriage, for wanting attention from my own husband, for existing in ways that might inconvenience his real priorities. I just didn't know yet that his real priority had a name, and it wasn't mine. The company Christmas party in December was always the highlight of Michael's professional year. For 30 years, I'd been his perfect +1. Charming with clients, gracious with colleagues, the supportive wife who made him look good. This year felt different from the moment we walked into the Phoenix Country Club ballroom. Michael immediately spotted his team across the room and headed straight for them, leaving me to navigate the cocktail hour alone. I didn't mind initially. I knew most of these people had attended dozens of these events. But as I approached different groups, conversations seemed to pause awkwardly before resuming with forced brightness. "Clara, how lovely to see you," said Margaret from accounting, but her smile seemed strained. "You look wonderful. That dress is so classic." Classic? The diplomatic way of saying outdated. I grabbed a glass of wine and found myself gravitating toward a group of wives I'd known for years. Susan Morrison, Janet Walsh, and Linda Chen. Yes, Jessica's mother worked in HR. They were deep in conversation when I approached. "Oh, Clara," Susan's voice had that overly bright quality people use when they've been talking about you. "We were just discussing the stress these big campaigns put on our husbands." "The Henderson account has been particularly demanding," I said, settling into what I thought was normal conversation. "That's what we heard," Janet said, exchanging a quick glance with Linda. "It's wonderful that Michael has such dedicated support at work. Jessica's been absolutely invaluable from what we understand." Linda chin shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, maybe we should." "No, it's fine," I said, though alarm bells were starting to ring. "Jessica is very committed to her work." "Committed is one word for it," Susan murmured, taking a sip of her martini. That's when I heard it. A familiar laugh from across the room. Michael's laugh, the deep, genuine one he used to save for our private moments. I turn to see him standing near the bar with Jessica, his head thrown back in amusement at something she'd said. She was wearing a stunning red dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, and she was touching his arm as she spoke. "Poor Michael," I heard Margaret saying behind me. I hadn't realized she'd joined our group. Carrying all that stress at home and work. His wife doesn't understand the pressure he's under. The words hit me like ice water. I turned around slowly. "Excuse me?" Margaret's face went pale. "Oh, Clara, I didn't see you there. I was just..." "What did you just say about his wife not understanding pressure?" The group fell silent. Linda Chun was staring at her shoes. Susan suddenly became very interested in her drink. Jessica appeared beside me as if materialized from thin air, her smile radiant and sharp as broken glass. "Clara, you look lovely tonight. We were just talking about how hard Michael works. You're so lucky to have someone so dedicated." Her voice dripped with fake sweetness. "I was telling everyone how Michael stays late almost every night, making sure every detail is perfect. He's such a perfectionist, but I'm sure you know that better than anyone." The other wives nodded sympathetically, but I could see the pity in their eyes. They knew something I was still pretending not to understand. "He certainly is dedicated," I managed, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "Well, someone has to understand his vision," Jessica continued, her hand resting lightly on my arm in a gesture that felt more possessive than comforting. "These big campaigns require such long hours, such intimate collaboration. Not everyone appreciates the sacrifice that level of excellence demands." I looked across the room at Michael, still laughing, still charming, still playing the role of successful executive. But he wasn't looking for me in the crowd. He wasn't checking to make sure I was okay, wasn't saving a space for me in his conversations. I spent the rest of the evening watching my husband through new eyes, seeing him shine in ways that had nothing to do with me, while his colleagues' wives offered me the kind of gentle smiles usually reserved for the recently widowed. The confrontation happened on a cold January evening, 2 weeks before Michael's heart attack. I'd been carrying the weight of that Christmas party humiliation for 3 weeks, replaying Jessica's words, remembering the pity in those women's eyes. I couldn't pretend anymore that nothing was happening. Michael was in his office as usual, laptop open, phone buzzing with what I assumed were work messages. But when I walked past, I glimpsed a text notification on his screen. Missing you already. Can't wait for tomorrow night. Jay. My heart started pounding.
Tomorrow was Thursday.
Michael had told me he was working late on budget reviews. Michael, we need to talk. He didn't look up from his screen. Can it wait? I'm in the middle of something important. No, it can't wait. I sat down in the chair across from his desk, the same chair where we used to plan family vacations and discuss the kids' college applications. Are you having an affair? His fingers stopped moving on the keyboard. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the humming of his computer. Then he slowly closed the laptop and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold, calculating, almost annoyed. Jesus, Clara, really? This is what you want to do right now? I saw the text from Jay. Missing you already. You're reading my private messages now. His voice was sharp, accusatory, like I was the one who'd done something wrong. It popped up on your screen. I wasn't snooping. Jessica is my colleague, Clara. We work closely together. These big projects create bonds between team members. If you had ever built something of your own instead of living through my career, you'd understand professional partnerships. The words hit like physical blows. Living through his career, like supporting him, moving for him, sacrificing for him, had been some kind of selfish choice. Professional partnerships don't usually involve missing each other, I said, my voice quieter. Now Michael stood up, pacing behind his desk like a caged animal. Not every relationship is about sex, Clara. Jessica understands my work in ways you never could. She gets the pressure, the deadlines, the creative process. When I talk to her about a campaign, she doesn't just nod politely and change the subject to grocery lists or vacation planning. I've always been interested in your work. You've always been interested in the benefits of my work, he snapped. The salary, the insurance, the nice house, the status. But you've never understood what I actually do, what it takes, what it costs me emotionally. I felt like I was drowning. Michael, that's not fair. I've supported you for 31 years. You've been comfortable for 31 years, he corrected. There's a difference between support and dependency. Clara, Jessica challenges me intellectually. She pushes me to be better, to think bigger. She sees possibilities where you see problems. So, you're having an affair? He was quiet for a long moment, and in that silence, I heard the death of my marriage. I'm having a relationship with someone who values what I bring to the table, he said finally. Someone who doesn't make me feel guilty for being ambitious, for wanting more than suburban mediocrity. I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady. I see. Do you, Clara? Because I've been trying to figure out how to tell you that this isn't working anymore. We've grown in different directions. You want to keep living the same small life, and I want something bigger. Bigger like Jessica. Jessica is just the beginning. She's shown me what it feels like to be with someone who matches my energy, my ambitions. Someone who isn't content to just coast through life. I walked to the doorway and turned back. Where does this leave us? I think you should sleep in the guest room while we figure things out, he said, already opening his laptop again. I need space to think. I spent the next 2 weeks in the guest bedroom, tiptoeing around my own house, making quiet dinners, doing laundry like a ghost haunting her former life. Michael was polite but distant, treating me like an unwelcome house guest. I never got the chance to fight for my marriage. 2 weeks later, Michael collapsed in his office from a massive heart attack. Sometimes I wonder if he died thinking Jessica was his future, and I was just an obstacle he hadn't gotten around to removing yet. 3 days after the funeral, I woke up on the couch wearing the same black dress I'd worn to the memorial service. I couldn't remember falling asleep there. Couldn't remember much of anything from the past 72 hours except the endless parade of casseroles and condolence cards. The house was suffocatingly quiet. For 3 decades, our home had hummed with Michael's presence. His morning shower, his coffee grinder, his phone calls, the sound of his car pulling into the driveway. Now there was nothing but the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway and the occasional creak of the house settling around me. Daniel had flown back to Seattle the morning after the funeral. His new job at the tech startup couldn't spare him any more time, and I'd insisted he go back to his life. Emma had offered to stay longer, but I'd sent her back to Denver, too. I need to figure out how to do this alone. I told them both, though I had no idea what this even was. I shuffled to the kitchen and stared at the coffee maker. Michael had always made the coffee. For 31 years, I'd wake up to the smell of French roast brewing. Now I stood there like an idiot, trying to remember the ratio of coffee to water. Such a simple thing, but it felt insurmountable. His coffee mug was still sitting on the counter where he'd left it that last Tuesday morning, white ceramic with "World's Best Dad" printed in fading blue letters. Emma had given it to him for Father's Day 15 years ago. I picked it up with trembling hands and held it against my chest, breathing in the faint smell of coffee that still lingered. "I don't know how to be me without being your wife," I whispered to the empty kitchen. The words hung in the air, pathetic and true. Who was Clara Martinez when she wasn't Michael's wife? I couldn't remember the last time I'd made a decision that wasn't about Michael's needs, wants, or schedule. What did I like? What did I want? I'd spent so many years being the supporting character in someone else's story that I'd forgotten I was supposed to have my own. The refrigerator was packed with sympathy food from neighbors and church friends. Casseroles I'd never eat. Fruit salads going brown. A honey-baked ham that could feed a family of 8. I opened container after container. The smell of other people's kindness made my stomach turn. I ended up eating crackers standing at the counter, too exhausted to sit down, too tired to taste anything. The phone rang constantly. Rosa checking on me, the insurance company asking about claims, Michael's office wanting to know about personal items in his desk. I stopped answering after the third call from Jessica, sobbing about how much she missed him, how the office wasn't the same without his brilliant mind. By Thursday, I was talking to Michael's coffee mug. "Remember when Emma had that terrible boyfriend junior year? You said if she could survive dating Tyler, she could survive anything." I laughed, a broken sound in the empty kitchen.
You were right about that.
She did survive, but I don't know if I can survive this. The silence that answered me was deafening. I found myself sitting on our bedroom floor at 2 o'clock in the morning, surrounded by photo albums, trying to find myself in our shared history. Wedding photos where I looked young and radiant. Family vacations where I was always behind the camera or standing slightly to the side. Christmas mornings focused on the kids opening presents while Michael played Santa. When was the last photo where I was the center of attention? When was the last time I did something just for me? I couldn't find any. In 31 years of marriage, I had slowly, systematically erased myself until I was just a background figure in my own life. The worst part wasn't grieving Michael. The worst part was realizing I didn't know who I was supposed to grieve for when it came to myself. It was Monday morning, exactly 1 week after the funeral, when I finally forced myself to tackle Michael's home office. I'd been avoiding it, walking past the closed door like it might bite me. But the lawyer needed financial documents for probate, and I couldn't put it off any longer. The room still smelled like Michael's cologne and the leather chair he'd spent countless hours in building his career. His desk was exactly as he'd left it. Papers in neat stacks, pens arranged in perfect rows, his monitor displaying a screensaver of our family vacation to Yellowstone from 5 years ago. I started with the obvious places. The filing cabinet where he kept our tax returns, the desk drawers with bank statements and investment portfolios. Everything seemed normal, organized, exactly what you'd expect from someone who'd always handled the big picture finances, our retirement accounts, the mortgage documents, his 401k paperwork. But then I noticed something wedged behind his computer monitor, a manila folder that looked newer than the others, the edges still crisp and clean. The tab was labeled Personal Insurance in Michael's careful handwriting. I almost ignored it. We'd already submitted the claim for his basic life insurance policy through work, $50,000 that barely covered the funeral expenses. But something made me pull the folder out and open it. Inside was a life insurance policy I'd never seen before. The header read, Southwestern Life Insurance Company, with a policy number and date. Purchased 8 months ago, just after Michael turned 61. The coverage amount made me gasp, $250,000. $250,000 I knew nothing about. My hands started shaking as I scanned the pages. Premium payments of $340 monthly, automatically deducted from an account I didn't recognize. Medical exam completed. Psychological evaluation waived. Policy active and in good standing. Then I reached the beneficiary page. Primary beneficiary, Jessica Chun. Date of birth, March 15, 1982. Relationship to insured, co-worker and dear friend. Not wife, not spouse of 31 years. Not the woman who'd given up everything to support his career. But there was more. Below the beneficiary designation in Michael's familiar handwriting was a handwritten note stapled to the page. For your new beginning. As we discussed, you deserve someone who puts you first. The house in Sedona will be perfect for us once everything is settled. I love you more than I ever thought possible. The house in Sedona. They'd been planning to buy a house together. I read the note 3 more times, each reading making it worse. Once everything is settled. That meant once he'd left me. Once he discarded 31 years of marriage like an old suit that no longer fit. With trembling fingers, I dialed the insurance company's customer service line. Southwestern Life Insurance, this is Brad speaking. How can I help you today? My husband recently passed away. I'm calling about his life insurance policy. I gave him Michael's name and social security number. I'm so sorry for your loss, Mrs. Martinez. Let me pull up that information for you. I heard typing in the background. Yes, I see the policy here. It's quite substantial, $250,000. The beneficiary is listed as Jessica Chen. Are you calling to update your contact information for the claim process? I'm his wife, I said quietly. There was a pause. Oh, I see. Well, the policyholder specifically designated Miss Chen as the sole beneficiary. He was very clear about that when he purchased the policy. Said it was for someone very special to him. Someone very special to him. Not me. Never me. When exactly was this policy purchased? March 15th of last year. Ma'am, Mr. Martinez came in personally to sign all the paperwork. Said he wanted to make sure everything was perfect for the beneficiary. March 15th, Jessica's birthday. He bought her a $4 million insurance policy on her birthday, 8 months before he died. I hung up the phone and sat in Michael's chair, holding the policy that proved everything I'd suspected and feared was true. I sat in Michael's chair for what felt like hours, staring at that insurance policy until the words blurred together. The handwritten note kept drawing my eyes back. You deserve someone who puts you first. The irony was suffocating. For 31 years, I had put Michael first. I had moved when he wanted to move, sacrificed my career for his ambitions, shaped my entire identity around being his perfect wife. And in return, he had spent the last months of his life planning my replacement. But something strange happened as I sat there surrounded by the evidence of his betrayal. Instead of the crushing despair I'd felt all week, a different emotion was rising in my chest. Not anger exactly, though that was there too. Something clearer, sharper, something that felt almost like relief. For the first time in months, I wasn't questioning my instincts. I wasn't telling myself I was being paranoid or oversensitive. The Christmas party humiliation, the late nights, the emotional distance, Jessica's familiar tone when she answered his phone, all of it had been real. My gut had been trying to tell me the truth, and I'd been too afraid to listen. I stood up slowly and walked to the bathroom mirror in Michael's ensuite. The woman looking back at me had red-rimmed eyes and hollow cheeks. But there was something different in her expression. Something I hadn't seen in years.
Clarity.
I called Rosa without thinking about the time difference or what I would say. Mija, what's wrong? You sound different. I found it.
Rosa.
I found the proof. Proof of what? The affair. The life insurance policy. Everything. I told her about Jessica, about the $250,000, about the handwritten note planning their future together. I need to know who I am when I'm not being Michael's wife. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Rosa's voice, fierce and protective. You're Clara Martinez. You're brilliant and kind, and you've been hiding your light under someone else's shadow for too long. You remember when we were girls and you used to tutor the neighborhood kids? You could explain algebra to a 7-year-old and make them understand. You had this gift.
I had forgotten that.
Completely forgotten. I loved teaching, I whispered. You were born to teach, Clara. You gave it up for him. But that doesn't mean it died. Nothing about who you really are died. After we hung up, I found myself walking to the hall closet where I'd stored boxes of my old life. Behind winter coats and forgotten Christmas decorations, I found them. 3 cardboard boxes labeled Clara's teaching materials in my own handwriting from 15 years ago. Inside the first box were my lesson plan books filled with my passionate notes about engaging young minds, about making learning magical for children. My handwriting looked so confident, so purposeful. This was a woman who had known exactly who she was and what she was meant to do. I pulled out a journal I'd kept during my first year teaching. The pages were filled with stories about breakthrough moments with struggling students, about the joy of watching a child's face light up when they finally understood a concept. One entry made me stop breathing. Today, Marcus finally read a whole paragraph without help. He looked up at me with such pride and said, "Mrs. Martinez, I'm really reading." These are the moments that remind me why I was put on this earth. Teaching isn't just my job. It's who I am. Who I am. Not who I was in relation to someone else, but who I was as an individual human being with my own gifts, my own purpose, my own dreams. I spent the rest of the evening reading through those journals, remembering the woman who had believed she could change the world, one student at a time. The woman who had dreams that had nothing to do with being anyone's supporting character. For the first time since Michael's death, I felt something besides grief. Curiosity about my own future. What could Clara Martinez become if she stopped trying to be who everyone else needed her to be? The next morning, I woke up with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. For the first time since Michael's death, I showered, put on real clothes instead of pajamas, and made myself breakfast. But more importantly, I made a decision. I was going to find out exactly who my husband had been when he wasn't being mine. I started with the phone book. Yes, I still had one. I found listings for private investigators in Phoenix. The first 2 I called sounded sleazy, asking probing questions about affairs and divorce proceedings. But the third, a woman named Margaret Thornton, had a different approach. "Mrs. Martinez, I'm sorry for your loss. What exactly are you hoping to learn? I need to know the truth about my husband's relationship with his coworker. I need to understand the timeline, the extent of their involvement. I found evidence, but I need the complete picture for closure, for justice." Margaret's voice warmed slightly. "I can help with that. My rate is $75 an hour plus expenses. I'll need some basic information to get started." While Margaret began her investigation, I quietly started building my own foundation. First, I opened a checking account at a different bank, Wells Fargo, instead of Chase, where Michael had always insisted we keep our money. When the banker asked about the source of funds, I simply said, I was reorganizing my finances after my husband's death. Completely true, just not complete. Next, I spent hours online researching teaching certification requirements in Arizona. My education degree was solid, but I'd need to complete continuing education credits to renew my teaching license. I enrolled in 3 online courses through Arizona State University: Modern Classroom Management, Technology Integration in Elementary Education, and Supporting Diverse Learners. I told no one about the courses. Not Rosa, not Emma, not Daniel. When my laptop arrived, the first computer I'd ever bought for myself, I set it up in the guest bedroom where I'd been sleeping. It felt symbolic somehow, learning new things in the room where Michael had exiled me during our final weeks together. The hardest part was calling Riverside Elementary, the school where I'd taught 15 years ago. Principal Garcia had retired, but the secretary, Mrs. Henderson, remembered me. Clara Martinez. Oh my goodness. How are you? I heard about Michael. I'm so sorry for your loss. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. I'm calling because I'm thinking about returning to teaching. Would it be possible to speak with the current principal about potential opportunities? Absolutely. Dr. Ramirez would love to talk with you. We're always looking for experienced teachers, especially with your background in reading intervention. I scheduled a meeting for the following week, my heart pounding as I wrote it in my calendar. It had been 15 years since I'd applied for a job, since I'd had to sell myself as anything other than Michael's wife. Meanwhile, Margaret called with her first update. I've confirmed that your husband and Jessica Chun were involved romantically. I have photographs of them at dinner dates going back at least 10 months, possibly longer. They were also apartment hunting together in Scottsdale. There's more, but I'd prefer to show you everything in person. How much more? Enough to establish a clear pattern of planning for a future together. Mrs. Martinez, based on what I found so far, this wasn't a casual affair. They were building a life together. Each piece of information hit like a physical blow. But I didn't break down. Instead, I felt something unexpected: determination. Michael had spent months planning to discard me, making me feel like an obstacle to his happiness. But he'd made a crucial mistake. He'd underestimated me. That evening, I updated my resume for the first time in 15 years. Under career objective, I wrote, "Dedicated educator seeking to return to the classroom to inspire young minds and make a meaningful difference in children's lives." I was no longer just Michael's widow, grieving and lost. I was Clara Martinez, and I was building something of my own. Margaret called me on a Thursday morning 3 weeks after I'd hired her, her voice carrying a mixture of professionalism and barely contained excitement. "Mrs. Martinez, I need you to come to my office. What I have to show you is substantial, and you'll want to sit down for this conversation." Her office was a small, neat space in a strip mall, nothing like the dramatic detective agencies you see in movies. Margaret was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She spread a series of photographs across her desk like she was dealing cards. These were taken over the past month, but they document a relationship that clearly goes back much further. The first photo showed Michael and Jessica at an upscale restaurant in Scottsdale, leaning across the table toward each other, her hand covering his. The timestamp showed it was taken 6 weeks before Michael's death on a Tuesday evening when he told me he was working late on budget reviews. "This one's from the Sedona trip you mentioned," Margaret said, sliding another photo toward me. It showed them walking hand in hand through a resort lobby. Jessica was wearing a sundress I recognized from one of our company picnics. February 14th, Valentine's Day weekend. Michael had told me he was at a marketing conference in Tucson. I'd spent that Saturday alone, actually feeling grateful that he was dedicated to his career. But here's where it gets interesting, Margaret continued, pulling out what looked like real estate documents. They weren't just having an affair. They were building a life together. These are rental applications for a 2-bedroom apartment in North Scottsdale. The lease was supposed to start April 1st. April 1st, 1 month after Michael's death, they'd been planning to move in together. Jessica signed a 6-month lease on her current place specifically to end in March. According to my sources at Michael's office, she'd been telling colleagues for weeks that she was practically engaged and planning to give notice once some personal matters were resolved. Personal matters. That's what I was. A personal matter to be resolved. There's more. Margaret handed me a printout of financial records. Michael opened a joint savings account with Jessica in January. They'd been depositing money regularly. Looks like they were saving for furniture, maybe a down payment on a house. A joint savings account. While I was in the guest bedroom feeling like an unwelcome visitor in my own home, Michael was opening joint accounts with another woman. "How much money?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. $18,000 as of his death date. But here's the thing, Mrs. Martinez. Jessica has been trying to access that account. She went to the bank twice last week, apparently frustrated that it's been frozen pending probate. I felt something shift inside me. Something cold and sharp and unexpectedly satisfying. She's expecting her payout, more than expecting it. According to office gossip, she's been shopping for new cars, told people she was coming into some money soon, and wanted to celebrate Michael's memory by living the life they'd planned together. The audacity was breathtaking. She was planning to spend my husband's insurance money while I sat in my empty house eating sympathy casseroles. But here's what she doesn't know, Margaret said, her voice taking on a different tone. I did some research into Arizona community property law. That insurance policy, the one worth $250,000, it was purchased with marital assets during your marriage. In Arizona, that makes it community property regardless of who's named as beneficiary. I looked up sharply. What does that mean? It means you have legal standing to contest that policy. As the surviving spouse, you're entitled to at least half of any assets acquired during the marriage, including life insurance policies purchased with community funds. Even if I'm not the beneficiary? Even if you're not the beneficiary, the law protects surviving spouses from exactly this kind of situation. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. Really smiled. Jessica had been so confident, so comfortable in her victory. She'd humiliated me at that Christmas party, answering Michael's phone with casual intimacy, planning their future while I grieved my marriage. But she'd made the same mistake Michael had. She'd underestimated me. Margaret, I need you to keep investigating. I want to know everything about their relationship, their plans, their finances, everything. What are you planning to do? I gathered up the photographs, looking one more time at Michael's face in those pictures. He looked happier than I'd seen him in years. I'm planning to introduce Jessica to the Clara Martinez she never bothered to get to know. I chose Café Luna, a small coffee shop 2 blocks from Michael's office. Neutral territory, public enough to keep things civilized, private enough for the conversation I needed to have. I arrived 15 minutes early and chose a corner table where I could see the entrance, spreading Margaret's folder of evidence beside my untouched latte. Jessica walked in at exactly 2 o'clock, scanning the cafe until she spotted me. She was wearing a black blazer that looked expensive and carrying a designer handbag I didn't recognize. Her smile was warm and sympathetic as she approached, the same expression she'd worn at Michael's funeral. Clara, thank you so much for reaching out. I've been thinking about you constantly since the service. She slid into the chair across from me, her voice soft with practiced concern. How are you holding up? I'm managing, I said, keeping my voice steady. I wanted to talk to you about Michael. Of course, he was such an incredible man. We all miss him terribly at the office. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue she'd apparently brought for this performance. He spoke about you often, you know. He was so grateful for all your support over the years. Did he? I opened the folder and pulled out the first photograph. Michael and Jessica at dinner, her hand on his arm, both of them laughing. He must have mentioned me when he took you to Season's restaurant on February 8th. That's our anniversary restaurant, by the way. We had our rehearsal dinner there 32 years ago. Jessica's face went pale, but she recovered quickly. Clara, I think there's been some misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. I placed the Valentine's Day photos on the table. Sedona looks beautiful that time of year. I've always wanted to visit the resorts there. Michael and I talked about it for our anniversary, but he said the marketing conference in Tucson was too important to miss. Her hands started trembling slightly. I can explain. Please do. I'm particularly interested in this one. I pulled out the real estate documents. A 2-bedroom apartment in North Scottsdale. Lease starting April 1st. Were you planning to have roommates, Jessica? Clara, you don't understand the pressure Michael was under at work. Our relationship was professional. I laid out the bank statement showing their joint savings account. $18,000. That's quite a professional collaboration. What were you saving for together? Jessica's composure finally cracked. Look, I know this looks bad, but Michael and I had something special. He was unhappy at home, Clara. He told me how lonely he felt, how disconnected you two had become. Lonely? I pulled out the life insurance policy and placed it in front of her. Is that why he bought you a $4 million insurance policy? Because he was lonely. Her eyes went wide when she saw the beneficiary designation. You found it. Oh, I found much more than that. I leaned forward, my voice dropping lower. I found the handwritten note about your new beginning. I found the evidence of your apartment hunting, your vacation planning, your entire future together. I know about the joint account, the expensive dinners, the lies he told me about working late. Clara, please. But here's what you don't know, Jessica. I closed the folder and looked directly into her eyes. That life insurance policy you've been waiting for, the one you've already started spending, it was purchased with community property funds in Arizona. That makes me entitled to contest the entire policy. What? The color drained completely from her face. Michael may have named you as beneficiary, but he bought that policy with marital assets during our marriage. I have every legal right to challenge that designation. I stood up, gathering my papers. I also know you opened a joint savings account with a married man, planned to live with him while he was still married to me, and have been telling colleagues you were practically engaged to someone else's husband. You can't prove. I can prove all of it. Photos, financial records, lease agreements, witness statements from your coworkers, everything. I picked up my purse and looked down at her one final time. You know what the difference is between us, Jessica? You thought you were stealing a man who would leave his wife for you, but I know you were just the latest in a long line of women who helped him betray the person who actually built his life with him. Clara, wait. Oh, and Jessica, that BMW you've been shopping for? I'd hold off on the down payment. I walked out of the cafe, leaving her sitting there, surrounded by the evidence of her own arrogance, finally understanding that the quiet housewife she dismissed had been paying attention all along. 2 days after my confrontation with Jessica, my phone rang with a call I wasn't expecting. It was Frank Rodriguez, Michael's longtime friend and our family lawyer. His voice was unusually grim. Clara, I need you to come to my office immediately. There's something about Michael's finances that you need to know, and it's not something I can discuss over the phone. Frank's office had always felt like a sanctuary, warm wood paneling, family photos, the smell of leather and old books. But today, his expression was troubled as he gestured for me to sit across from his massive oak desk. I've been going through Michael's financial records for the probate, and I found something that changes everything. He pulled out a thick folder marked with our address. Clara, did you know that Michael took out a home equity loan against your house? My stomach dropped.
What?
No, he never mentioned anything about that. $47,000. Clara, the loan was originated 9 months ago, and the monthly payments have been automatically deducted from your joint checking account. You never noticed because Michael handled the account reconciliation. What did he use the money for? Frank's face was grim. Based on the payment records I've traced, it appears he used it to pay the premiums on that life insurance policy you found, the apartment deposit in Scottsdale, and various other expenses related to his relationship with Jessica Chin. The room felt like it was spinning. Michael had mortgaged our home, the home I decorated, maintained, and loved for 15 years to finance his affair and his exit strategy. Frank, what does this mean for the insurance policy? It means the policy wasn't just purchased with community property funds. It was purchased with fraudulent intent. Under Arizona law, when someone uses marital assets to benefit a third party without spousal consent, especially while planning to abandon the marriage, it constitutes fraud. The entire policy is voidable. I sat back in my chair, processing this information. So, Jessica gets nothing. If we can test it properly, Jessica gets nothing. But there's more. Frank pulled out another document. I also discovered that Michael forged your signature on the home equity loan documents. He had no legal right to encumber your house without your knowledge and consent. Forged my signature. After 31 years of marriage, he'd forged my signature to steal equity from our home to pay for his new life with another woman. What are my options? We can file a fraud claim against the insurance company, which would void the policy entirely. We can also pursue charges against Michael's estate for the forged loan documents, which would recover the $47,000 plus interest. Frank paused, his eyes glinting with something that looked almost like satisfaction. There's one more thing.
What?
Jessica's employment at Michael's company. I did some research into their corporate policies. As Michael's direct subordinate, any romantic relationship between them violated the company's ethics guidelines. If we provide evidence of their affair, The company would be obligated to terminate her employment immediately and potentially pursue recovery of any bonuses or promotions she received during the period of their relationship. My mind was racing. Not only could I void the insurance policy, but I could also cost Jessica her job and potentially force her to repay money to the company. Frank, I want you to do something for me. What's that? I want you to void the insurance policy, but I don't want to keep the money. I took a deep breath, thinking about those teaching journals, about the woman I'd been before I lost myself in Michael's shadow. I want to donate the entire amount to establish an education scholarship fund for single mothers returning to school to become teachers. Frank looked surprised. Clara, that's very generous. But you could use that money. I don't want his blood money, Frank. But I do want Jessica to know that the $4 million she was counting on is going to help women build independent lives for themselves. Women who won't make the mistake of depending on men like Michael and her job. I smiled, feeling a satisfaction I hadn't experienced in years. Send the evidence to her company's HR department. Let them handle that situation according to their own policies. 3 weeks later, I received a call from Margaret. Jessica had been terminated from her position effective immediately. She'd also been required to repay a $15,000 performance bonus she'd received during her relationship with Michael. As for the scholarship fund, I named it the Clara Martinez Education Foundation. For the first time in my adult life, something important bore my name instead of his. The call from Emma came on a Tuesday evening in April, just as I was reviewing lesson plans for my new third-grade class. I'd been back at Riverside Elementary for 2 weeks, and the joy of teaching again was like remembering how to breathe after holding your breath for 15 years.
Mom.
Emma's voice was tentative. Careful. I heard something through Dad's old office network about Jessica Chin being fired and something about a scholarship fund. I sat down my red pen and leaned back in my chair. News travels fast. Mom, what happened? Really happened? Because the story I'm hearing doesn't sound like the grieving widow I've been worried about for months. I told her everything. The insurance policy, the affair, the forged documents, the confrontation at the coffee shop. Emma was quiet for long stretches, occasionally making small sounds of disbelief or anger.
Jesus, Mon.
Dad did all that, and you handled it by yourself. I handled it because I finally remembered who I am when I'm not trying to be who someone else needs me to be. I should have been there, Daniel, and I should have stayed. Should have helped you through this. Sweetheart, I appreciate that, but I needed to do this alone. For the first time in my adult life, I needed to solve my own problems without anyone rescuing me or making decisions for me. There was a pause, then Emma's voice, smaller now. I feel like I don't know you at all. The mom I knew would never confront anyone, would never hire a private investigator, would never stand up for herself.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm proud of you, but it's also kind of scary. Like, you were this completely different person the whole time, and we never saw it. That night, Daniel called from Seattle. Word had apparently reached him, too, probably through Emma. Mom, I keep thinking about that Christmas party when you came home upset but wouldn't tell us why. You knew something was wrong even then, didn't you? I suspected, but I talked myself out of trusting my instincts. I'd been doing that for so long. I'd forgotten they existed. I should have pushed you to talk about it. Should have asked more questions. Danny, you were 25 years old starting your career. It wasn't your job to manage your parents' marriage. But maybe if I'd paid attention then, what? You would have tried to fix it for me? That's exactly what I needed to stop depending on other people to do. The following weekend, both kids flew into Phoenix without telling me, showing up at my door with grocery bags and determined expressions. We're here to help, Emma announced, pushing past me into the kitchen. We're going to clean out Dad's stuff, organize your paperwork, whatever you need. I looked at my children, my beautiful, well-meaning children who wanted to swoop in and take care of me like I was fragile. I appreciate the thought, but I've already cleaned out your father's belongings. I donated his clothes, sold his golf clubs, and converted his office into a reading room for my lesson planning. You did all that already? Daniel asked, surprised. I did all that already, and I'm doing fine. Better than fine, actually. I gestured around the house, which looked completely different with new throw pillows, rearranged furniture, and bright artwork I'd bought for myself. Look around. Does this look like the home of a woman who needs rescuing? Emma surveyed the changes. The photos of me with my students on the mantel, the stack of education journals on the coffee table, the bright yellow accent wall I'd painted the week before. Mom, you seem almost happy. I am happy. For the first time in years, I'm living my own life instead of being a supporting character in someone else's story. But don't you get lonely? Daniel asked. I smiled, thinking about my classroom full of 8-year-olds, about the teachers I'd reconnected with, about the satisfaction of grading papers and planning lessons. Honey, I spent 31 years feeling lonely while married to your father. Being alone is completely different from being lonely. And I'm not alone. I have my students, my colleagues, my purpose. I have myself. That evening, as we sat on my back patio sharing takeout Chinese food, Emma said quietly, "I'm sorry we never really knew who you were, Mom." "You're getting to know me now," I replied. "That's what matters." 6 months after finding that insurance policy, I stand in my 3rd grade classroom at Riverside Elementary, watching 22 8-year-olds work on their art projects. The afternoon sun streams through windows I decorated with their colorful drawings. And the walls are covered with their stories, their achievements, their bright personalities captured in crayon and marker. "Mrs. Martinez, look what I made," calls Sophia, holding up a painting of a rainbow arcing over what appears to be a small house. "It's you and your new house being happy." Sophia is one of my struggling readers, a little girl who reminds me why I came back to teaching. 3 months ago, she could barely sound out simple words. Yesterday, she read an entire chapter book and couldn't stop smiling. "It's beautiful." "Sophia, tell me about the rainbow." "That's all the colors you taught us about feelings. You said feelings can be like colors, sometimes dark, sometimes bright. The rainbow means you can have all the feelings and still be okay." Out of the mouths of babes. I had taught them that lesson during our unit on emotions, never expecting it to reflect so perfectly back to me. My phone buzzes with a text from Rosa. "Dinner Sunday. I want to hear about your students and that Teacher of the Month nomination." I type back quickly. "Can't wait to tell you about Sophia's reading breakthrough." And yes, I'm still shocked about the nomination. Teacher of the Month. 6 months ago, I was a woman who apologized for existing. Now, my colleagues nominated me for recognition because of my innovative reading intervention programs and the way I connect with struggling students. As my students pack up their supplies and line up for dismissal, I think about the journey that brought me here. Michael's betrayal, devastating as it was, had actually set me free. If he hadn't died when he did, I might have spent years more shrinking myself, accommodating his needs, believing his narrative that I was the problem in our marriage. "Mrs. Martinez," says Marcus, the same Marcus I'd written about in my teaching journal 15 years ago, though this is a different Marcus, a new 8-year-old with his own struggles and triumphs. "My mom wants to know if you can help my sister with reading, too. She's in 5th grade, but she's still having trouble. Tell your mom to call me. I'd be happy to recommend some strategies." After the children leave, I sit at my desk grading their math homework, something I never thought I'd do again. The Clara who married Michael had dreams of changing the world one student at a time. That woman got lost somewhere in the moves, the career sacrifices, the gradual erosion of her identity. But she wasn't gone. She was just waiting. I pull out my phone and scroll to a photo Emma took when she visited last month. Me sitting in this very classroom, surrounded by my students, all of us laughing at something ridiculous Marcus had said during our reading of the BFG. In that photo, I see a woman who knows exactly who she is and what she's meant to be doing. On my desk sits a small framed quote I bought for myself. She believed she could, so she did. Next to it is a thank you card from the mother of one of my students, Ms. Martinez. "Thank you for helping Jamie discover that she loves reading. You've changed her life. Changed her life. Just like Sophia. Just like Marcus. Just like all the children who will pass through this classroom in the years to come." I look around my classroom one more time before turning off the lights. Tomorrow, 22 third graders will walk through that door expecting me to teach them something new, to help them grow, to see their potential even when they can't see it themselves. For 31 years, I believed my purpose was supporting someone else's dreams. Now I know my purpose is my own, and it's bigger and more important than I ever imagined. I am Clara Martinez. I am a teacher. I am exactly where I'm meant to be.